We lost the stream. I don't know why. Let me make sure that I didn't miss anybody in the chat. Hmm. I don't know if I can see the chat anymore. If you commented something in the chat, just comment it again in this one. I don't know what happened to the stream. My OBS like froze. Let's see here though. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I can replay uh, the chat for some reason. I don't know why. Well, that sucks. Technology. I must have said something. Um, let's see. Let's go back here. The stream got cut. What is going on? So put any comments. I didn't see anyone's comments, by the way, so I don't even know if there was any, but put any comments you had in the previous chat into this one, and I will answer them. All right. Wow. This is one of the reviews on Luis's work. I heard this guy attempt to describe his theory for an hour and a half. Basically, this author's mind is what you get if you combine Deepak Chopra, the My Pillow guy, and the Catholic first grader. Then ask them to talk about how quantum theory can inform our politics in a way that proves God's existence. As best as I could glean, his theory is that if we take the mathematics of string theory, assume it implies that a mind is behind the structure of the universe, then we can apply this math to how people vote within their political systems in order to resolve our differences using the intuitive symmetry of how God created everything, which will solve all of humanity's problems, because apparently democracy is a broken political system and each person shouldn't receive one vote. Not everybody should vote. That's just a fact. And this will be probably a fact. And this will be equivalent to God's salvation of humanity. If you're curious to learn more about this theory, quote unquote, and how none of its dots can be logically connected, then by all means buy this book. Of course, I'm happy to be corrected if all this pans out, but I won't hold my breath. That's hilarious. Whoever wrote this would not like my work anyway, so I'm not judging Luis's work. That sounds like a review of probably what my book would. That guy would write almost the same thing about my book, except I would say my difference between Luis and I is he thinks you need to imply the inverse square law and to voting and give people voting weight based on their donation of wealth. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I I see where it could be. I mean, I know that there's some. He's leaning on mathematical structures that are very um, that are universal. I mean, the square root and is, as Eric Weinstein puts it, the psychedelic of mathematical operations, and you know, people who think that they've got a glimpse of reality usually do so through psychedelics. So um, that 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 structure makes sense, but I would just say I think only married people should vote. I think that means that, like, that's, you have to have an objective line between adults and children. Okay, and it's either biologically, it's, are you post-pubescent or prepubescent? Other than that, there is no objective line, and it's not even post-pubescent, whatever that means. It means, like, are you able to make more little humans? And if you are, then you are biologically not a child anymore. And that is an objective line. So, but that's not a good line when it comes to helping us define who should be making decisions and have the responsibility of making decisions for society. That should be people who have proven themselves and their actions to be adults, which is, I would say, like, an infant needs to be taken care of. A child can take care of themselves, or an adolescent, and someone who is not yet an adult. And then an adult takes care of others. So it's like, I've discussed this before. That movie Big Daddy, where the little kid is like trying to prove how mature he is, and he's like, "I wipe my own ass. I wipe my own ass." And because Adam Sandler says to him that in the beginning, he's like, "I'm an adult. I wipe my own ass," and I think that that's wrong, actually. And the message of this movie is basically that that's wrong. It's not. He Adam Sandler's character grows up and becomes an adult by the end of the movie because he takes care of this kid. So basically, a kid or child is taken care of. An adolescent takes care of themselves, and an adult takes care of others. So it's like, you have your ass wiped by others, then you wipe your own ass, and then eventually you wipe the ass of others. And when you wipe the ass of others, those are the people that I want voting. And those are and also people because society is built on families, because if you look at the periodicity of growth in my model, it goes organism, family, caste, nation, or technological singularity. So if you have to recognize that the most direct structure that the next levels are built on of society is the family structure. It's also the only replicative structure. Human being is not a replicating structure as an individual organism. So it requires the coming together of a male and a female into basically a nuclear family. And it's not just enough to just mate either. You can do that for a few generations, but actually the destruction of the nuclear family leads to a dying population over time. So it's not just that the next generation was produced outside, even if the next generation was produced outside the nuclear family, it doesn't mean that you don't need the nuclear family in order to have a self-replicating structure going that or that you don't need the nuclear family in order to grow. You do, and it's evident over time. It's very evident over time. People who don't form nuclear families, when people stop forming nuclear families, they stop reproducing over time. It just is. And it might take a few generations, but that's nothing. So what matters is what is inevitable. Is it inevitable that you grow, or is it inevitable that the trend is towards growth, or that the trend is towards not growth? So this review is so funny. I feel a little bad for Luis, but I also know that how people speak about my work, and it's with sometimes even more, disdain and hostility than this review. I would laugh at this review. I hope he laughed at this review, because there are just people that don't understand, and like that's fine. Anybody who's like, anybody who mentions Deepak Chopra as if he mentioning him as an argument that's a legitimate argument against a scientific idea or a logical idea, it does not understand reality at all. I mean, I don't follow Deepak really in any way, but I've heard probably 30 minutes of him speaking total, and he understands quantum physics better than Sean Carroll. So there's that. It doesn't matter that people don't believe that, but it's true. Not saying he gets everything right. I don't know. I haven't listened to him enough. And nobody gets everything right. But anybody who says this is about consciousness and that we're inside of a singular consciousness, which I don't know if Deepak says that, but I would imagine so. I don't know how you say this is all consciousness without saying this is all one consciousness. But you automatically understand reality better than anybody who says that that's not the case. They are incorrect. It's not even. It's logically inevitable that they are incorrect. So, hats off to Deepak. But this is a model that I'm not sure if I'm going to include. I probably will. I will. Even though it is represented in this model. So you can see that this information is being processed in each one of these layers of quanta of consciousness, as I call them, or which is, a periodicity of sentience. And as they process, that spinning movement that you see, so like right there, and then there, and then there, that movement is this. So it's going through these perspectives until it goes basically from the outside in. So outside in, from oneness, outside in to oneness, and then from oneness inside out to oneness. Once you get here, this point right here is actually the same exact point as this. It's a loop. Okay? So this model is going through those motions, but this is a description of those motions. Once you get to the end, you are back to you've done a complete circle. It's like the fermions going 720 degrees to come back to their starting point. That's because of this. That's why this is 720, and so is this. It's because it's also the reason that, the fermions go through 720 degrees of rotation to come back to where they started, because this perspective right here is this. It's a circle. Basically, the universe is looking at itself from the inside out and the outside in at the same time. And this model is very good at showing basically how when you're trying to change information, so let's say you're trying to change the zeros here to ones and the ones to zeros, if you do it in a way that is based on the rules of computation, you would do it like this. And these are all the various steps. There's actually 16 actions, 17 perspectives. If you do it according to the rules of a quantum computer, which all sentient beings are quantum computers, they can basically optimize the processing of that information because they can perceive things in a superposition. So because of their ability to imagine. So you basically change all ones to twos, then you go and you change the zeros to ones, because if you change all zeros to ones without changing the ones to twos first, or to anything else that's not ones, everything will be ones, and you will lose context of information, and you've lost it. So you have to maintain context of information from the start to the finish of either of these two options. This one is basically calculating like our computers calculate now. This one calculates like a quantum computer does. And then once you change the zeros to ones, then you can change the twos back to zeros. Or not back to zeros, because you're maintaining context or throughout the actions, the chain of actions, which is the maintaining of coherence. And the context is dictated by the colors. So if everything here is just like H2 equals 1, place all. It's like, do you see what just happened? You lost all informational context, because these are all, I have a rule set up that basically is coloring them according to just the values. So if the goal is to get from here to here, there's 3 actions, 4 perspectives. 4 primary perspectives, 3 actions. If you are in relativity, it seems, which is computational, instead of perceivable, which is different, I would say this is perceivable, and this is computational. Computational movement is like flying from here to Hawaii on a jumbo jet. Perception-based movement would be like warp transportation. I see where I want to go, and I go. And I see where I want to go. I see how I need to get, I see how to get there, and I go. But there's no computation taking place for the universe, really. It's just perceptions are shifting, and then you'll have to compute things once you make the change. But this is why I don't know if it's such a good idea to do warp transportation without permission from the universe. I don't even know what that means, but I'm just saying, before you go and you move information from one context to another without it that movement being computational, um, I just remember you're inside a sentient being. You're not inside an inanimate, not living thing. You're inside a living thing, like a living being. And to it's like changing your DNA with CRISPR. It's like your DNA doesn't know why it's been changed if you use CRISPR. It just knows that now information is out of context from its perspective, even if it's in context from your perspective. So warping might be in context from our perspective, warping from where we are to where we want to go. But from the universe's perspective, it might not. It might be out of context, and you don't want to do that because that's the destruction of information from the universe's perspective. You don't want to. It's like altering DNA without permission. What if our cells had just decided to alter our DNA outside of context of outside the normal contexts? It would be artificial alteration like CRISPR, not just the alteration that comes from viral influences and generationality and things like that. That would probably not be good. I'm very serious about this, but this is why physics and science and our sciences are about to be linked much more to morality, and because they have to be. You can't use warp speed without moral considerations. Same thing with nuclear technology as well. We just didn't even and we'll probably do the same thing with warp, but we'll probably ignore any kind of moral considerations until after the fact. But the difference is that it's not just that it would impact us and also sentient structures below us, like nuclear power, like the nuclear era did, but the entanglement era impacts the level above us as well. I think that if too many people changed information outside of context, like warp, at any single given time, the universe would have to knock back our technology consciously in order to preserve itself. I mean that, like, if too much of your DNA changed at once, if you changed half your genes in your genome with CRISPR all in one shot, you would die. So if your cells decided somehow that they got a hold of CRISPR technology and decided to change half your genome at once, a group of cells, in the interest of self-preservation, you'd probably take away the power that those cells have, or at least a lot of it. However you would do that, I don't know. Like the same way we do with cancer. Cancerous cells are killed. They're wiped out because they cannot be allowed to go about their agenda, because it will lead to the destruction of the being that they're within. And they're not aware of what they're doing. They're just like, they've said, and literally this is what has happened essentially, is they've lost their way. They don't understand their context anymore, their meaning, and they've decided to be self-interested and not, because they are not aware of the structure that they are within anymore, or of their responsibilities. So it's like when people in politics decide to abandon any sense of responsibility and form ideological movements that are intrinsically selfish and denying of personal responsibility. That is literally like the equivalent to cancer. And this has been said even in politics as a label for certain movements. I'm not going to get into it, but it's not a coincidence that those movements were labeled as cancerous, because they probably are. Like, any movement that abandons any, or that denies context and personal context and responsibility is cancerous. Legitimately cancerous. It is metastic. Like, I think that's the right word. It's not like it. It's not like cancerous. It is. That is what cancer is. It's a it's a it's an it's a political ideology of childish cells that are ignorant. That's literally what it is. It's not like that. It is that. And when you realize that, it gives you context and understanding that could really apply to medical advances in the future, and I don't know, all kinds of things. I'm not saying I understand how you would use that, but when you understand what's actually happening in your body, it's probably more likely that you're able to do something about it. What do you think of free will and people and agency over the universe then? Like CRISPR is the extreme, but what about just making decisions against the universe? You can make decisions against the universe. People do it every day. Everybody does it all the time. We all do it all the time. But it's important to recognize that we all do it all the time. Be honest about when you do it to the best of your ability, and align your greater goals with the goals of the universe as best as you possibly can. Otherwise, because if you align your greater goals against the universe, you're going to lose. Like, you cannot go against God. You will lose. His will be done. Like, it's like saying, it's like denying gravity. You can't. It is very much like denying gravity. When you realize gravity is a conscious action by the universe to animate existence, then it really is like denying gravity. So anything that you do that is against peace, growth, beauty, truth, honesty, all of these things are against the universe. But you know, people are imperfect, and God knows that, and your main job is to align your greater goals with God and improve over time. Don't people tend to freak out. Sin is a big deal, but to focus on it to the point where it is paralyzing is also wrong. It's like people who focus on like purity culture so much so that they lose the understanding of, they lose sight of the point of the original intention of that culture. You know, I watched this show with my wife, and it's called Married at First Sight, and it's actually a pretty good show. And it's nothing like The Bachelor or anything like that. It's the problems in it are real, and there's also, you know, unique situation that they're in. Basically, you go and they have a psychologist and a pastor and all these people like match couples, and then you see them at the altar for the first time, and you decide to get married or not, and then you have like 2 months or something like that to decide whether or not you want to stay married. And in it, there was someone who was a virgin and, you know, wore purity ring and had like, they were all about purity culture. They got married, went months and months married, and still kept defining themselves by their virginity, not realizing that like shouldn't be pro virginity. You should be pro marriage. And like, so this is like when the avoidance of sin becomes when the avoidance of sin becomes paralyzing of good deeds or of growth or of mitzvahs, then that avoidance of sin literally becomes sin. It's like if if nobody ever bred, we would all die. So that doesn't mean that it's that marriage isn't the proper context of sex. It is, but like there's a difference between being pro marriage and being pro virginity. One of them leads to nothing. The other one leads to growth. It's funny because I always say this. People are like, "Are you a centrist on all kinds of things?" Because I understand where both of sides of a lot of current societal debates come from, and I'm not a centrist, but I'm not on the right and I'm not on the left. I recognize that you need heads and tails for a coin. It's not, you can't just have a quarter with heads or a quarter with tails. You need both. There's currently like the sex positive movement, and it's like, you know, you have like, you know, promiscuity is like encouraged, which is not good. Then you also have the purity movement, which is like virginity is something to be cherished, and it's like that's not good. There is a central column that is marriage, and marriage is where I would say is the label for where I sit on many things. I'm pro the marriage of the left and the right, not being a centrist. Means the difference is like the centrist believes that all responsibilities rest with everyone, and that we have to make compromises and go halfway between what you want and I want, and in order to achieve, you know, that's the right path. That's not the right path, because what that does is it basically is saying that the sole job of these two perspectives, whether it's male or female, right or left, liberal, conservative, whatever it may be, religion, science, their sole job is to hold each other back and keep each other in check, which means to hold each other back. That's not good. Their job is to complement each other. Men's job is not to keep women in check primarily. It is to empower women. Women's job is not to keep men in check primarily, even though that's part of their job, and it's also part of men's job to keep women in check. It is men's primary job to empower women, and it is women's primary job to empower men. This is the marriage perspective. It is the complementary it is a complementary take on our reality. It is not a compromising take on our reality like centrism. So in politics you would say the left's job, which is really, the left is just government. That's really what left is. The right is the market. So it's not really this battle between like conservatives and liberals in politics. It seems like that, but it's not. The ultimate battle is between, that we currently have, which should not be a battle, is between government and the market. And people that think government is terrible are wrong. You must constrain the market or it will become the mob. And you also must have a market, because that allows for innovation and growth and leads. Market is leading. It is masculine. It's the male on this level. So if the market turns into the mob, the problem is that it becomes self-defeating, and you will end up having power structures that hold the market back, holds back innovation. So you literally need the government to constrain the market to keep it from becoming the mob, so that it doesn't constrain itself and hamper growth. And this is the reality of, you know, left and right and government and market, and it's this idea of like, are you big government? Big government sucks, bro. Like, I come from PragerU, so I understand like the big government sucks mentality. And but I also understand the mentality of we need to take care of the people who are our citizens and like or who are in our nation. A nation is a group of people that shares a commonwealth. That commonwealth needs to be common and used for the commons. Like, it's not something that the idea that we should have as little taxation as possible. And by the way, I don't want we're way overtaxed, so we're past that. But I'm just saying that we shouldn't have any kind of safety nets in place or unifying structures like a UBI or something like that. They're also wrong. So this is just an important lesson of the theory of everything, is that the path of truth is a complementary path, which is a marriage between two things that appear to be opposites but are actually complementary, like the government and the market, and or even the many and the one, or quantum mechanics and general relativity. Like these, both of these, men and women, like these are all structures that we don't contextualize well, because we think about it as, are you right, are you left, or are you over here, or are you over here, or are you a centrist? No, like a centrist would say everyone's responsibility is everything, and we'll just compromise halfway on everything. Good luck having that be any fun at all. Like, that sounds horrible. But and it also leads to just vindictiveness and people keeping score and all kinds of stupid things. That's like men and women going into a marriage, and I'm recently married, and I can tell you the idea that everything is split, like responsibilities, as far as, I do half the dishes, she does half the dishes. I sweep half the floor, she sweeps half the floor. I cook half the meals, she cooks half the meals. This is not a path to success. You will get divorced. You need to say, these are your responsibilities, because it is tied to your unique skills and talents. These are my responsibilities because they are tied to my unique skills and talents. That's it. And just make sure everything is covered. That is marriage, or complementarianism, versus compromising. I was going to say compromisism, but just because it was funny. But a compromising perspective, which is a centrist perspective, which is just like, you cook half the meals, I cook half the meals. I change half the diapers, you change half the diapers. You will get divorced. And this is what we're doing in so many things. And it's why our society's falling apart. But just a random tangent. I guess not random, but a tangent. I hope that makes some sense. But free will and determinism, these are two things that require each other. They are codependent. They're not mutually exclusive. They are what's a good way of describing? You can't have one without the other. They are two entangled perspectives and truth aspects of reality. You cannot have determinism without choice, because someone has to choose to, drop the Gatorade. And it has to fall in a specific direction that is determined, or else you didn't choose anything. So if there is no determinism, then there is no ability to have choice. And in objectivity, if we exist in an existence that is a sentient being, and that all of creation was a choice, then all that is then in that way, even the existence of a deterministic reality, due to the existence of a created logos, a created generative universe, that is a choice. So and the laws that govern the structure of that are deterministic, but it was a choice that led to the creation of determinism, and also determinism that allows for choice within the universe, at least. So outside the universe, with God, it's a little bit more complicated because he's unique. And if you're all that is, and there's only one sentience, and there is no multiplicity created yet, and you're just beyond creation, then any change would be the creation of multiplicity of consciousness, because all that can exist is consciousness. So you can't actually create anything that isn't a consciousness, probably, even if you're God. If you create anything, it must be a consciousness, because it has to have internal coherence and in order to have structure, and it has to have structure in order to have beingness. So if it doesn't, then it doesn't really exist. So you can't actually create anything that is actually created new if it isn't a consciousness. It's like, why is the existence conscious? Because it is self-contained, and therefore internally consistent and coherent, and therefore self-referencing, and therefore a consciousness. Like, it must be. God, the existence must be sentient. There's no, it doesn't seem possible that it isn't. So that's also true, probably, that creation must be sentient. It doesn't seem possible that it isn't. If you're going to create anything that actually exists, try creating, a pen without creating hadrons, atoms, and molecules. You can't. So even though the pen is not sentient, the molecules and the atoms and probably the hadrons are. So because of that, you still need, this is entirely composed of sentient beings. It's just, the way in which they're entangled from our vantage point in the universe makes it look like a pen and function like a pen. This is a very cool pen. It's the only pen I've ever bought that's not like a disposable pen. I don't know why we use disposable things. Side tangent. I think and I'm guilty of this because I have OCD about paper towels. I go through paper towels like crazy, and it drives my wife crazy. But every time I wash my hands, dry my hands, I also have animals, so I'm constantly using paper towels to deal with them. But I do think that our culture of disposability is really bad. Buy a nice pen that you're never going to throw away. Don't buy those cheap pens that you will always throw away, like this. Don't buy this. Buy this so that you never throw it away. It's much better for the environment. Plus, this is plastic, this is titanium. And plastic is bad for the environment. And it's probably making our sperm count cut in half. All right. Let's go back to my outline of the paper. This topic is very difficult to discuss still because I don't have the right terms for it yet figured out. So I apologize if it's been like a little disjointed, but it's basically a working session. So we have the 4 primary perspectives, information change model, the binary triality, which is the pattern that is everywhere. It's this pattern. It's in the fermions, mathematical order of operations, the senses, the colors, questions, rocks, castes, family structures, food groups. It's basically our mind processing information into it. 3 structures, a linear hierarchy, a radial orientation structure, which is from the center out, a linear hierarchy, which is basically like a line that's a causal line, a causality line. And then also a basically differentiation structure. So, or based, which is like categorization. So you're categorizing, you're prioritizing, and you're contextualizing information, and it is generating this structure everywhere you look. It's due to your mind and the fact that you're inside a mind that structure is everywhere. So there's that. The quantum of consciousness. I don't really like the name too much because I feel like it's so loaded, even though I think it's a great description. It's just, everybody's like, oh, quantum consciousness, like another one. But maybe it keeps coming up because you can't kill that phrase of quantum consciousness. I'm not the only one that's ever said this. There's many people that say quantum of conscience, quantum consciousness. There's something true in that statement. And we probably, at first I thought about getting rid of it, but then I was like, why am I changing terms that we can't seem to escape because there's an intrinsic truth to them, or that we keep coming back to appease the people that, that use words like pseudoscience. Only pseudoscientists use words like pseudoscience. So, quantum consciousness. The stages of sentience. This is this model, right? Oh. Here. An atom of hadrons is one level, then a cell of molecules is the next, a family of organisms is the next, technology of castes is the next. That can also be broken down into what is basically Bott periodicity, or the periodicity of sentience, which are these 8. A hadron is an assembly of quarks, an atom is an assembly of hadrons, a molecule is an assembly of atoms, a cell is an assembly of molecules, an organism is an assembly of cells, a family is an assembly of organisms, a caste is an assembly of families, and technological singularity is an assembly of castes, and then it repeats within itself. So there are 2 perspectives on one structure. The stages of sentience and the periodicity of sentience, essentially. Which is basically like the cosmological verse. Right here. You've got these 8. An a hadron is an assembly of quarks. An atom is an assembly of hadrons. A molecule is an assembly of atoms. A cell is an assembly of molecules. An organism is an assembly of cells. A family is an assembly of organisms. A caste is an assembly of families. And technology is an assembly of castes. And then it repeats again. Like that within itself. So you have creation, 4 primary perspectives of one being. You have creation. It leads to the universe. And all the periodicity the periodicity of sentience that is Bott periodicity, probably, which is also the 4 stages of sentience, just broken out more. 4 of those perspectives, of the 8 perspectives, maneuver in time via lineage, changes in lineage structure, in structure over lineages, essentially. The others, the other 4 make changes and maneuver in space via their interaction with other sentient beings around them. So, like, an organism maneuvers via space. A family maneuvers via lineage, basically. Castes maneuver via space. Technology maneuvers via lineage, because technology is an aeon or verse, and it's part of a lineage, because there's one, and then from there comes another, and another, and another. Cells maneuver in a lineage. And molecules maneuver via relationships. That's how molecules are made. Atoms maneuver in a lineage, which is basically the elements are a lineage. That's why they call, like, an element that is created after a preceding element is called a daughter of the previous. So, like, gold is the daughter of platinum, I think. I don't think platinum is a daughter of gold. I think gold is the daughter of platinum. Gold is 76, so platinum. What is it? 70, 78. Okay, so yeah. It's platinum is a daughter of gold. That's what it is. Whereas gold would be a daughter of silver in some way. So daughter element. A daughter element. The element formed when a radioactive element undergoes radioactive decay. The latter is called a parent. The daughter may or may not be radioactive. I think I might have gotten this wrong on what the definition is. But I think that stable atom at the end is the daughter product, figure below. A daughter isotope. Okay, I see here. I was wrong. So, like, the elements are species, and then the isotopes, the chain of isotopes would be the daughter and parent lineage. Okay. So I was wrong. I mean, it still holds with the model, but it's just it is good for me to know. But basically, it's like saying, you know, there was a common ancestor. If gold is a human, if platinum is a human and gold is a chimpanzee, there was a common ancestor. And then basically the lineage within chimpanzees would be the isotope lineage within each of the elements, but the speciation is between the various elements. That makes perfect sense. Actually, that's pretty cool. Okay, that's more detailed than I thought, and it makes perfect sense. But if you notice, that lines up perfectly with species of animals as well, and of organisms. We don't. This theory will remind us really what speciation is objectively. Right now, biology is totally lost, and I'm telling you this because I know for a fact, because I'm in the herpetological world, which is the world of reptiles and amphibians, and also other animals as well. We currently have biologists, and the current state of taxonomy is insane. They will call something a different species if it's a different color. And if it's from that island instead of that island, and it's more yellow than that one, it's a different species now. That is insane. Okay? Like, that's not what a species is. If that's what species can be, species is a useless term. Like, we should just do away with it and say that's the yellow ones from that island, and that's the less yellow ones from that island. That would be more useful than making these species, these animals into different species. A species is when reproduction is no longer possible. Like, you can't make you can no longer birth a fertile lineage. Reliably birth a fertile lineage. If you can't do that, then you have a break in speciation. Our environmental divides of, this animal is on this island, so we'll never interact with that animal on that island. So therefore, now we're going to call it different species. Or if this gene is different on this in this population than that population, now we're going to call it different species. That one's more yellow than that one. We're going to call it a different species. That one has a slightly different scalation pattern. Now we're going to call it a different species. It's become insane. It's just become like, a bunch of people seeking clout. It's the same thing that Eric Weinstein talks about is happening to all fields. It's like when you stop growth, people start cannibalizing, and even if they don't even know it. So they're still looking to grow. There's still an embedded growth obligation. People who consider themselves biologists are still looking to have meaning in their work. So they're going to make new species. They're going to label things new species. That needs to stop. And Sentient Singularity Theory, or the theory of everything, will put an end